I woke up to 3 sheriff's deputies standing on my front porch at 6 in the morning, and my propane tank was completely empty, despite filling it 2 days before the storm hit. The knocking was aggressive, the kind that makes your heart jump into your throat before you're even fully conscious. I stumbled out of bed, pulled on yesterday's jeans, and made it to the door just as one of the deputies raised his fist to pound again. Through the frosted glass, I could see their uniforms and the unmistakable shape of their duty belts. "Owen Anderson," the lead deputy asked when I opened the door. He was a broad-shouldered guy in his 40s with graying temples and the no-nonsense expression of someone who had been doing this job too long to find anything surprising anymore. "That's me. What's this about?" I ran a hand through my hair, trying to shake off the confusion and the remnants of sleep. "We need you to come down to the station. There's been a complaint filed against you for theft and property damage." I actually laughed. It was such an absurd thing to hear at 6 in the morning that my brain couldn't process it as anything but a joke. "What? Theft? There must be some mistake." "No mistake, sir. We have a complainant who says you stole a lock and 35 pounds of propane from her property." "That's felony theft given the value and circumstances." "Wait, what?" The fog in my brain was clearing fast now. "Someone is saying I stole propane. I'm the one who's missing propane. My tank is empty." The deputy's expression didn't change. "Like I said, we need you to come down to the station. You can explain everything there." "Can I at least put on a shirt and brush my teeth? Make it quick." As I headed back to my bedroom, my mind was racing. I had moved into this house in Harrisburg, Pennsylvania, just 8 months ago. It was a nice 3-bedroom ranch in a development called Willow Creek Estates, and it had seemed perfect at the time. The HOA fees were reasonable, the neighborhood was quiet, and the house itself was exactly what I needed after my divorce. The propane tank out back heated my water and ran my backup generator, which was essential during the harsh Pennsylvania winters. I threw on a clean shirt and splashed water on my face, brushing my teeth as quickly as I could. My hands were shaking slightly. I had never been in trouble with the law in my life. I was a 38-year-old software developer who worked from home and kept to himself. This was insane. When I came back out, the deputies were still waiting on the porch, professional and impassive. One of them had been talking into his radio. "We ready?" the lead deputy asked. "Yeah, but I need to understand what's happening here. Who filed this complaint?" "A Gloria Carmichael. Says she's the HOA president for your development." My stomach dropped. Gloria. Of course it was Gloria. Gloria Carmichael had been a thorn in my side since the day I moved in. She was 52 years old, according to the community directory, though she dressed like she was trying to be 30. She had that particular haircut that seemed to be standard issue for a certain type of suburban woman, short and aggressively styled with too many highlights. She drove a white Lexus SUV and had opinions about everything, especially things that were absolutely none of her business. Our first encounter had been during my move-in day. She had shown up with a clipboard and a fake smile to inform me that my moving truck was parked in a way that violated HOA regulations, even though it was in my own driveway. Since then, she had cited me for my grass being a 1/4 inch too long, for leaving my garbage cans visible from the street for more than 12 hours after collection, and for hanging a wind chime that apparently violated the noise ordinance in the HOA bylaws. But this was different. This was criminal charges. "I need to lock my house," I said. "Go ahead." I grabbed my keys and wallet, locked the front door, and followed the deputies to their patrol car. One of them opened the back door for me. It wasn't quite an arrest, but it felt close enough. The back seat smelled like industrial cleaner and desperation. As we drove through the neighborhood, I could see curtains twitching in windows. My neighbors were watching. Great. Even if this got cleared up immediately, the damage to my reputation would be done. That was probably what Gloria wanted. The sheriff's department was a squat brick building on the edge of downtown Harrisburg. They took me inside, past the public waiting area, and into an interview room. It was exactly like what you see on TV. Plain walls, a table, a few chairs, and a mirror that was definitely one-way glass. "Wait here," the deputy said, and then I was alone. I sat there for what felt like forever but was probably only 20 minutes. My mind was going in circles, trying to figure out what could have possibly happened. The storm had rolled through 2 nights ago. It had been a bad one with high winds and heavy snow. I had prepared for it by making sure my propane tank was full, my generator was ready, and I had plenty of supplies. When the power went out around midnight, my generator had kicked on perfectly. Except it had only run for about 4 hours before it died. I had assumed the storm had damaged something in the electrical system. When I went to check it in the morning, everything seemed fine mechanically, but the propane gauge read empty. That made no sense because I had just filled it. And then I had noticed something else. The lock I always kept on the propane tank valve was gone. It wasn't on the ground nearby, it wasn't in the snow. It was just gone. I had been meaning to investigate further, but with the storm cleanup and getting my power back on, I hadn't had time. Now apparently Gloria was claiming I had stolen it from her. The door opened and a detective walked in. She was younger than I expected, maybe in her early 30s, with dark hair pulled back in a practical ponytail. She was carrying a folder and a cup of coffee. "Mr. Anderson, I'm Detective Sarah Martinez. Thanks for coming in this morning." I didn't really have a choice. She sat down across from me and opened the folder. "Let's start from the beginning. What can you tell me about your relationship with Gloria Carmichael?" "She's the president of my HOA and she's been harassing me since I moved in. If she's claiming I stole something from her, she's lying. Strong words. I'm accused of a felony I didn't commit. I think strong words are appropriate." Detective Martinez nodded slowly, studying me. "Tell me about the lock and the propane." "My propane tank out back has been there since before I bought the house. The previous owners installed it. I keep a lock on the valve because propane is expensive and I've heard of people siphoning it. 2 days ago, before the storm, I had the tank filled. It was at 95%. The storm hit, the power went out, my generator ran for a few hours and then died because the propane tank was empty. When I checked it yesterday morning, my lock was gone and the tank was drained. And you're saying Gloria Carmichael did this?" "I don't know who did it, but now she's apparently claiming I stole propane from her. That's backwards. Someone stole from me." The detective made some notes. "Mrs. Carmichael came in yesterday afternoon. She filed a complaint stating that she had a propane tank at her residence, and that you removed the lock from it and stole approximately 35 pounds of propane during the storm. She has photos of her tank with the lock removed and the propane level significantly lower than it was before the storm." "That's exactly what happened to me. So you both have the same story." "No, I have the truth and she's lying." "Detective, think about this logically. Why would I steal propane from her tank when I have my own tank? It makes no sense. Maybe you ran out and needed more during the storm. I filled my tank 2 days before. I had plenty. You have a receipt for that fill." I opened my mouth and then closed it. "I paid cash." "The guy who fills it is local. He doesn't always give receipts. So you have no proof you filled your tank?" "No, but he can verify it. His name is Dan, Dan's Propane Service. He's been filling my tank since I moved in." Detective Martinez wrote that down. "We'll check with him." In the meantime, I need to ask you where you were during the storm. At home. The power went out, I was alone, I didn't go anywhere in the middle of a snowstorm. So no alibi. This was getting worse by the minute. Detective, I'm the victim here. Someone cut my lock off and drained my tank. Why aren't you investigating that? We're investigating everything. But right now, we have one complainant who filed first and she has photos and documentation. What do you have? The empty tank in my backyard and the missing lock. Did you take photos? No, I didn't think I needed to document the crime scene in my own yard. She closed the folder and looked at me directly. Here's the situation, Mr. Anderson. Right now, this is a he said, she said situation, except she filed first and she has documentation. The value of the propane and the lock pushes this into felony territory. I need to investigate fully before we can determine who's telling the truth. So what happens to me? Right now, nothing. You're not under arrest, but I'm advising you not to leave the area and not to contact Mrs. Carmichael directly. We'll be in touch as the investigation continues. That's it. She makes up a story and I just have to wait. That's how the process works. If you're innocent, the truth will come out. I wanted to argue more, but I could see it wouldn't help. I left the station feeling sick to my stomach. They had me call a cab to get home since I hadn't driven myself there. The whole ride back, I kept replaying the conversation in my head, trying to figure out how this had gone so wrong so fast. When I got home, I went straight to the backyard to look at the propane tank again. In the daylight, I could see the cut mark on the valve more clearly now. Someone had used bolt cutters by the look of it. The cut was clean and deliberate. I took photos from every angle, cursing myself for not doing this immediately. Then I called Dan's propane service. An older woman answered. Hi, this is Owen Anderson on Maple Drive in Willow Creek. I need to speak to Dan about a fill-up he did for me on the 15th. Dan's out on calls right now, honey. What's this about? I explained the situation as briefly as I could. She listened, making sympathetic noises. Oh, that's terrible. Hold on, let me check his records. There was a pause, the sound of papers shuffling. Here it is. February 15th, 120 gallons delivered to your address. Dan noted it was a 95% fill. You keep copies of receipts even when the customer pays cash. We keep records of every delivery for tax purposes, yes. Do you need a copy? Yes, please. As soon as possible. Can you email it to me? She took my email address and promised to send it within the hour. I thanked her profusely and hung up. At least I had proof now that I had filled my tank. It wasn't everything, but it was something. I spent the next hour documenting everything I could think of. I took photos of the tank, the cut valve, the empty gauge. I wrote down a timeline of events. I checked my credit card statements to verify when I had bought the lock originally. I even went through my security camera footage. That's when I found something interesting. I had a basic Ring doorbell camera at my front door. I had never bothered to set up any cameras in the backyard because it seemed like overkill. But the doorbell camera had motion detection and kept footage for 60 days. I scrolled back to the night of the storm, looking for anything unusual. At 1:43 in the morning, the camera caught movement. Not at my front door, but in the street. I could see the edge of someone walking past, heading in the direction of the backyard path that ran between properties. The video quality wasn't great because of the snow and darkness, but I could make out a figure in a heavy coat carrying something. I saved the footage and kept watching. About 15 minutes later, the same figure came back, still carrying something, but moving faster. They got into a vehicle parked on the street. I couldn't see the license plate, but I could see it was a white SUV. Gloria drove a white Lexus SUV. My hands were shaking as I downloaded the footage. This wasn't proof positive, but it was something. It showed someone coming from the direction of my property during the time when my propane would have been stolen. I called Detective Martinez and left her a voicemail explaining what I had found. Then, I sat down and tried to think through this rationally. Why would Gloria do this? What was her motivation? The answer, when it came to me, was almost too stupid to believe. But it made sense in a twisted way. Gloria had been trying to get rid of me since I moved in. Every citation, every complaint, every nasty note left on my door had been her. She had made it clear she didn't like that I worked from home, didn't like that I was divorced, didn't like something about me personally. Maybe she saw me as lowering the tone of her perfect neighborhood. If she could get me arrested for a felony, I would lose my house. Even if charges were eventually dropped, the legal fees and the stigma would probably force me to sell. And if I was convicted, I would definitely lose the house. So she had done to me what she was accusing me of doing to her. She had cut the lock off my propane tank and drained it. Then she had gone home, taken photos of her own tank, and filed a complaint claiming I had done it to her instead. It was clever in a sociopathic way. She filed first, so her version became the official version. I looked like I was just retaliating with a made-up counter-story. The email from Dan's propane service came through. I printed the receipt and added it to my growing pile of documentation. Then I did something I probably should have done months ago. I started going through the HOA rules and regulations with a fine-tooth comb. The HOA bylaws were 73 pages of dense legal language. I had skimmed them when I bought the house, but now I read every word. And I found something interesting on page 42. Any HOA board member who used their position to harass or discriminate against a homeowner could be removed from the board and face financial penalties. Furthermore, any criminal action taken against a homeowner by a board member that was later proven to be false or malicious could result in the board member being personally liable for damages. I read it 3 times to make sure I understood correctly. Then I started looking into Gloria's history as HOA president. The development had a website with meeting minutes going back 5 years. I spent the rest of the afternoon reading through them. Gloria had been president for 3 years. In that time, she had filed complaints against 14 different homeowners. Most were for minor violations like lawn care or paint colors. But 3 people had moved out during her tenure, and in 2 of those cases, the meeting minutes mentioned ongoing compliance issues that had been resolved by the homeowner selling their property. I wasn't her first victim. I was just the latest. I printed everything out and put it in a folder. Then I started calling attorneys. The first 3 I tried didn't handle this kind of case. The 4th, a lawyer named Mitchell Brooks, listened to my story and agreed to see me the next day. That night, I barely slept. Every sound outside made me think Gloria was back, doing something else to set me up. I kept checking the doorbell camera footage on my phone, watching the street for any sign of movement. The next morning, I met with Mitchell Brooks at his office in downtown Harrisburg. He was in his 50s, with silver hair and the kind of calm demeanor that probably came from years of dealing with crazy situations. I laid out everything for him: the propane theft, Gloria's accusations, my documentation, the camera footage, the pattern of behavior from the HOA. He listened without interrupting, occasionally making notes on a legal pad. When I finished, he sat back in his chair and steepled his fingers. This is one of the more creative HOA nightmare stories I've heard, and I've heard a lot of them, he said. The good news is, you have more evidence than most people do in these situations. The bad news is, you're still facing a potential felony charge, and that has to be dealt with first. What do I do? First, I'm going to contact Detective Martinez and provide her with all of this documentation. The receipt from the propane company, the camera footage, the HOA records showing a pattern of harassment. Second, I'm going to file a counter-complaint against Gloria Carmichael for filing a false police report, harassment, and theft of your property. Can we prove she did it? The camera footage shows someone matching her general build walking from the direction of your property at the time of the theft, and that person got into a white SUV. She drives a white SUV. That's circumstantial, but combined with everything else, it creates reasonable doubt about her accusations against you. More importantly, it gives the detective a reason to investigate her instead of just taking her complaint at face value. What about the HOA angle? That's going to be a civil matter. Once the criminal stuff is resolved, we can file a lawsuit against her personally and against the HOA board for harassment, abuse of power, and intentional infliction of emotional distress. Those cases can take a while, but based on what you've shown me, you have a strong claim. How much is this going to cost me? He named a figure for the retainer that made me wince, but it wasn't impossible. And if we end up going to trial or filing the civil suit, there will be more. But here's the thing. If we win, and I think we will, you can recover your attorney fees as damages. The HOA's insurance might cover some of it, or Gloria might have to pay out of pocket. Either way, you're not just going to get your money back. You're going to get compensated for what she put you through. I signed the retainer agreement and wrote the check. It hurt, but having someone on my side who knew what they were doing was worth it. Mitchell worked fast. By that afternoon, he had sent a complete package of information to Detective Martinez and filed the counter-complaint with the sheriff's department. He also sent a letter to the HOA board informing them that Gloria was being investigated for criminal harassment of a homeowner, and that the board might want to consider their liability in the situation. 2 days later, I got a call from Detective Martinez asking me to come back to the station. This time, Mitchell came with me. We sat in the same interview room, but the atmosphere was different. Detective Martinez looked tired and a bit irritated. "Mr. Anderson, I want to apologize for how this investigation started," she said. "After reviewing the evidence your attorney provided, along with our own follow-up investigation, it's clear that Mrs. Carmichael's complaint was not accurate." "Not accurate is a nice way of putting it," Mitchell said. "We contacted the propane company, and they confirmed that your tank was filled on the date you specified. We also examined the footage from your doorbell camera. While it doesn't definitively identify the person, it does show someone walking from the direction of your property at the time in question, and that person got into a vehicle matching Mrs. Carmichael's." "So, what happens now?" I asked. "We've obtained a warrant to examine Mrs. Carmichael's property, including her propane tank. We're also going to be taking a closer look at her complaint. If we find evidence that she filed a false report or that she was the one who actually stole from you, she'll be facing charges." "What about the charges against me?" "Those have been dropped as of this morning. You're clear, Mr. Anderson." The relief that washed over me was so intense I felt dizzy. "Thank you." "Don't thank me. Thank your attorney for being thorough. If he hadn't provided all that documentation, this might have gone very differently." We left the station, and I shook Mitchell's hand in the parking lot. What happens next? Now we wait and see what the detective finds. In the meantime, I suggest you keep documenting everything and avoid any contact with Gloria. Don't engage with her, don't respond to her, don't even acknowledge her if you see her in the neighborhood. Anything you say or do could be twisted. I drove home feeling better than I had in days, but still wary. The charges against me were dropped, But Gloria was still out there, and I had no doubt she wasn't going to take this lying down. I was right. That evening, I got an email from the HOA board. It was a notice of violation, stating that I had failed to remove snow from my driveway within the required 24 hours after the storm ended, and that I owed a $200 fine. The email was signed by Gloria in her capacity as HOA president. I forwarded it to Mitchell with a note. "She's not giving up." His response came back in 5 minutes. "Ignore it. Don't pay, don't respond. I'm handling it." The next day, there was another notice, this time for my garbage cans being visible from the street. The day after that, a citation for my mailbox being the wrong shade of black. It was clear that Gloria was panicking and lashing out. Mitchell sent a cease and desist letter to the HOA board, but Gloria kept sending violations. She was spiraling. A week after my charges were dropped, Detective Martinez called me again. "Mr. Anderson, I wanted to update you on the investigation. We executed the warrant on Mrs. Carmichael's property. Her propane tank was nearly full, which contradicts her claim that you had stolen from it. We also found a lock in her garage that matches the description of the one missing from your property. She kept it. Why would she keep it? People make dumb mistakes when they commit crimes. We also found bolt cutters with fresh marks on them consistent with cutting through a lock. We tested them, and there were metal shavings that match the composition of your lock. So what happens to her? She's been arrested and charged with filing a false police report, theft, and criminal mischief. The filing of the false report is a misdemeanor, but the theft of your propane is being charged as a felony because of the value and the fact that she did it to deprive you of heat during a storm, which is considered a particularly egregious circumstance. She's really facing felony charges." She is. The DA is taking this seriously because of the false report aspect. She used law enforcement to harass you, and that's something they don't take lightly. Plus, there's the HOA angle. The DA is looking at this as an abuse of power situation. When's her court date? Arraignment is next week. You might be called as a witness if it goes to trial, but I'm guessing her attorney is going to advise her to take a plea deal. I thanked the detective and hung up. Then I just sat there for a minute, letting it all sink in. Gloria Carmichael, the woman who had made my life miserable for 8 months, was facing felony charges because she had gotten too clever with her harassment campaign. Mitchell called me later that day with more news. The HOA board held an emergency meeting. They've removed Gloria as president, effective immediately. They're also discussing dissolving the board entirely and restructuring because of liability concerns. Apparently, several other homeowners have come forward with complaints about her behavior now that she's been arrested. That's amazing. It gets better. I've been contacted by 3 other former residents of Willow Creek who moved out because of harassment from Gloria. They're interested in joining a class action lawsuit. If we can get enough people together, we can go after her assets and the HOA's insurance for systematic harassment and abuse of power. Over the next few weeks, I watched it all unfold. Gloria's arraignment made the local news. HOA president arrested for felony theft and false police report was the headline. Her mugshot showed her looking nothing like the put-together, imperious woman I had always seen. She looked scared and angry and small. The local newspaper ran a longer piece investigating the HOA and found that Willow Creek had one of the highest turnover rates in the area. 7 families had moved out in the past 3 years, and 4 of them agreed to be interviewed about their experiences with Gloria. The stories were remarkably similar to mine. Constant violations for minor issues, escalating harassment, and a feeling that she was trying to force them out. One former resident, a woman named Patricia, said that Gloria had filed a complaint with code enforcement claiming Patricia's home was a health hazard. Code enforcement had investigated and found nothing wrong, but the stress and embarrassment had convinced Patricia to sell and move. Another man said Gloria had started rumors in the neighborhood that he was a registered sex offender, which was completely false, but had made his life unbearable until he moved. The class action lawsuit grew to include 8 former residents and 3 current ones. Mitchell filed it in federal court, claiming civil rights violations and seeking damages in excess of $2 million. Gloria's criminal case moved forward. Her attorney tried to negotiate a plea deal, but the DA was firm. She wanted Gloria to plead guilty to the felony theft charge and serve at least some jail time. The abuse of power angle was too egregious to let slide with just probation and fines. I was called to testify at a preliminary hearing. It was the first time I had seen Gloria since her arrest. She looked older, her hair not as perfectly styled, her clothes more subdued. She wouldn't make eye contact with me as I walked to the witness stand. The assistant DA walked me through the events. The storm, discovering my propane was gone, the lock missing, being called in by the sheriff. Then they showed the doorbell camera footage on a screen for the judge. In the courtroom, with everyone watching, it was even more damning than I remembered. The figure was clearly carrying something heavy, moving with purpose, and the white SUV was unmistakable. Mr. Anderson, prior to this incident, had you had any disputes with the defendant? The ADA asked. She had cited me for numerous HOA violations since I moved in. Minor things, like my grass being slightly too long or my garbage cans being visible for too long after collection. I felt like she was harassing me, but I didn't think she would do something criminal. And on the night of the storm, what was your concern regarding the lack of propane? I needed it for my generator because the power was out. But more than that, I use propane for my hot water heater. Without it, my pipes could freeze, which would cause thousands of dollars in damage to my home. So the defendant's actions could have resulted in significant property damage to your home. Yes, and if the power had stayed out longer, I could have been without heat entirely. Gloria's attorney tried to poke holes in my testimony during cross-examination, but there wasn't much he could do. The evidence was overwhelming. The judge ruled that there was sufficient evidence to proceed to trial. Gloria's attorney asked for another shot at a plea deal. This time, Gloria took it. She pleaded guilty to felony theft and filing a false police report. The judge sentenced her to 18 months in jail, with the possibility of parole after serving 9 months. She was also ordered to pay restitution to me for the propane, the lock, and my attorney fees for defending against her false accusation. The total came to about $12,000, but the real impact was the felony conviction. Gloria was now a felon. She would have trouble finding employment, couldn't vote, and would have to disclose the conviction for the rest of her life. The civil case took longer, but it was almost anticlimactic after the criminal conviction. The HOA's insurance company settled rather than go to trial, paying out a total of $1.3 million to be divided among the plaintiffs. My share was about $200,000 after attorney fees. More importantly, the HOA was forced to restructure completely. A new board was elected, and they immediately rescinded most of the nitpicky rules that Gloria had enforced. The development became a much more pleasant place to live. I used some of the settlement money to install a proper security camera system around my house, including coverage of the backyard and the propane tank. I also bought a new lock, a heavy-duty one with a hardened steel shackle that would be much harder to cut. But mostly, I just enjoyed the peace and quiet. For the first time since I moved in, I felt like I could relax in my own home. I could let my grass grow an extra day without worrying about a citation. I could leave my garbage cans out for an extra hour. I could hang wind chimes without someone threatening me. Mitchell told me that Gloria's husband had filed for divorce while she was awaiting sentencing. Apparently, he had been unaware of the extent of her harassment campaign and was horrified when it all came out. She lost her house in the divorce settlement and was living in a small apartment when she reported to serve her sentence. I ran into one of my neighbors, a guy named Jeff who lived 3 houses down, a few months after everything was resolved. We were both getting our mail at the same time. "Hey, Owen," he said. "I just wanted to say thanks for standing up to Gloria. A lot of us were too intimidated to say anything, but she made all our lives miserable. I didn't really have a choice. She came after me pretty hard. Still, you could have just sold and moved like the others did. I'm glad you didn't. This neighborhood is a lot better without her running things like a dictator." We chatted for a few more minutes, and I realized something. I had made a friend. In 8 months of living here before the incident, I hadn't connected with anyone because Gloria had created such a toxic atmosphere. Now, people were actually friendly. There was a neighborhood barbecue that summer. The new HOA board organized it as a way to rebuild community spirit. I went, expecting it to be awkward, but it was actually fun. People were relaxed and friendly. Kids were running around. Someone had set up a volleyball net. A woman named Sarah, who lived on the next street over, came up to me with a beer. "You're the guy who got Gloria arrested, right?" she asked. I winced. "That's me. Is that going to be my identity forever?" She laughed. "Around here? Yeah, probably, but in a good way. You're kind of a folk hero. She made so many people's lives hell and you actually did something about it." I just defended myself. That's more than most people did. Anyway, I wanted to introduce myself properly. "I'm Sarah. If you ever need anything, I'm in the blue house with the red door on Oakmont Street." "Thanks. I'm Owen, but you already knew that." I did. "Also, fair warning, about half the single women in this neighborhood are going to try to set you up with their friends or daughters. You took down the Wicked Witch. You're basically a prince now." I laughed, but she was right. Over the next few months, I got invited to dinner parties, game nights, and casual hangouts, and there was almost always an, "Oh, you should meet my friend" moment. It was a little embarrassing, but also kind of nice. I had been so isolated for so long that I had forgotten what it was like to be part of a community. I even started dating someone I met at one of those game nights. A teacher named Rachel who lived in a different development, but had friends in Willow Creek. We took it slow, both of us being cautious after previous relationship failures, but it was good. She thought the whole HOA saga was hilarious and kept threatening to write a book about it. Gloria was released on parole after serving 10 months. I heard through the neighborhood grapevine that she had moved to another state to live with her sister. I hoped, for everyone's sake, that she had learned something from the experience, but I doubted it. People like that rarely change. The Willow Creek HOA continued to function, but with a much lighter touch. The new board focused on actual community improvement rather than harassment. They organized events, maintained common areas, and only enforced rules that actually mattered, like no broken-down cars on blocks in driveways. It was what an HOA should be. I settled into a routine. Working from home was actually pleasant now. I could take breaks and walk around the neighborhood without feeling like I was being watched and judged. I got to know my neighbors, not just as people I nodded to while getting the mail, but as actual friends. One afternoon, about a year after everything had happened, I was out in my backyard doing some gardening when I heard someone calling my name. It was Jeff, my neighbor, standing at the fence. "Hey, Owen, got a minute?" "Sure, what's up?" "The board is having elections next month, and we were wondering if you'd be interested in running for a position. We could use someone who actually understands why this stuff matters and won't abuse the power." I almost said no automatically. The last thing I wanted was to get more involved with HOA politics. But then I thought about it. If people like me, people who just wanted to live peacefully and treat their neighbors fairly, didn't step up, then people like Gloria would keep taking over these boards. "Let me think about it," I said. I talked it over with Rachel that night. She was supportive but cautious. "Just make sure you're doing it for the right reasons," she said. "Don't do it because you feel obligated. Do it because you actually want to make things better." I thought about it for a few days and realized I did want to make things better. I had seen firsthand how bad an HOA could be when run by the wrong person. I had also seen in the past year how good it could be when run properly. If I could help keep it on the right track, that seemed worth doing. I ran for a position on the board and won easily. My first meeting was a little surreal. I was sitting in the same community center room where Gloria had once held court, but the atmosphere was completely different. People were relaxed, discussions were collaborative, and decisions were made based on what was actually best for the community, not on personal vendettas. We tackled real issues: updating the playground equipment, fixing drainage problems in some of the common areas, organizing a community watch program. It was boring, practical work, but it felt good to be part of something positive. I served on the board for 2 years before stepping down to focus more on my work and my relationship with Rachel, which had gotten serious. We got engaged that spring, and I asked if she wanted to look for a house together somewhere else. "Why would we leave?" she asked. "You've built a good life here. You have friends, you've made a difference. This is home now." She was right. Willow Creek had become home, not in spite of the Gloria situation, but almost because of it. I had been forced to fight for my place here, and that had made me invest in it in a way I might not have otherwise. We got married in the community center, with the whole neighborhood invited. It was exactly the kind of gathering Gloria would have hated: loud, chaotic, full of joy and laughter. The new HOA board approved our request for use of the space without any hassle. No forms in triplicate or petty restrictions. During the reception, Jeff pulled me aside. "You know, when you first moved in and Gloria started targeting you, I felt bad for you, but I didn't say anything. I just watched it happen. I'm sorry for that. You weren't the only one. She had everyone intimidated." "Yeah, but still, I should have spoken up. I'm glad you did. You changed this place for the better." Looking back on the whole experience, that was what made it worth it. Not the settlement money, not the satisfaction of seeing Gloria face consequences, but the fact that I had helped transform a toxic community into a good one. It had been messy and stressful and scary at times, but the end result was worth it. I still keep that heavy-duty lock on my propane tank, and I still check my security cameras regularly. Some paranoia is probably healthy, but I'm not worried about Gloria specifically anymore. She's gone, and even if she came back, she has no power here. The neighborhood knows what she did, and they wouldn't tolerate it again. The propane tank itself has become something of a neighborhood inside joke. Someone made a fake historical marker sign and put it in my yard as a gag gift. Site of the great propane heist of 2025. I left it up for a few weeks before Rachel made me take it down because it clashed with her garden design. Life moved on. Willow Creek continued to be a good place to live. The HOA functioned smoothly under new leadership. I focused on my work, my marriage, and my friendships. The whole incident with Gloria became a story I told at parties, something that seemed almost unbelievable in retrospect. But every time I see the lock on my propane tank, I'm reminded that sometimes you have to stand up and fight for yourself, even when it's scary and uncertain. You have to document everything, get good legal help, and trust that the truth will eventually come out. And sometimes, just sometimes, the system actually works the way it's supposed to. The innocent are cleared, the guilty are punished, and justice is served. It doesn't always happen that way, but when it does, it's worth every moment of stress and fear and anger along the way. I never wanted to be the guy who took down the HOA president. I just wanted to live peacefully in my home. But when Gloria forced my hand by stealing from me and trying to frame me for her crimes, I didn't have a choice. I had to fight back, and I'm glad I did. The neighborhood is better for it. I'm better for it. And Gloria, wherever she is now, learned that you can't abuse power forever without facing consequences. On cold winter nights, when the generator kicks on, and I hear the reassuring hum of propane flowing through the lines, I'm grateful. Grateful for the heat, for the security of knowing my system is intact, and for the community I helped rebuild. Mitchell still calls me occasionally to check in. He says the Willow Creek case was one of his favorites because it had such a clear resolution. Good guys won, bad guy lost, community improved. He jokes that he should use it as a case study in his practice. I still work from home, still keep to myself most of the time, but now it's by choice rather than isolation. When I want company, I have neighbors who are genuinely friendly. When I need help, people show up. That's what a community should be. The HOA sends out a monthly newsletter now, and it's full of actual news about community events and improvements. No more threatening letters about minor violations. No more power trips disguised as rule enforcement. Just people working together to make their neighborhood a nice place to live. Sometimes I wonder what would have happened if I had just paid Gloria's initial fines, kept my head down, and tried to avoid conflict. Would she have left me alone, or would she have escalated anyway? I think she would have escalated. People like that always do. They thrive on control and conflict, and they don't stop until someone stops them. I'm glad I was the one who stopped her, even though I never wanted that role. Someone had to do it, and it turned out to be me. The fact that she was arrested, convicted, and served jail time for what she did sends a message to other wannabe HOA tyrants. There are consequences for abusing your power. The settlement money helped too. I used part of it to make improvements to my house that I had been putting off. New roof, updated kitchen, finished basement. The house that had been a source of stress became a place I was genuinely proud of. Rachel and I talked about starting a family, and Willow Creek seemed like a good place to raise kids now. Good schools, safe streets, friendly neighbors. Everything you could want in a community. The whole experience taught me important lessons about standing up for yourself, the value of good legal representation, and the importance of documentation. It also taught me that communities are only as good as the people who run them, and that sometimes you have to get involved to make sure the right people are in charge. I never wanted to be part of an HOA board, never wanted to be involved in neighborhood politics, never wanted to be the center of attention. But sometimes life pushes you into situations you didn't choose, and you have to make the best of them. Looking at my life now compared to where I was 18 months ago, the transformation is remarkable. Then, I was isolated, harassed, and facing potential felony charges for a crime I didn't commit. Now, I'm married, integrated into my community, and living in a neighborhood that actually functions the way it's supposed to. All because I refused to be pushed around, documented everything, got good legal help, and trusted the system to work. It was the hardest thing I've ever done, fighting that legal battle while dealing with the stress and uncertainty. But it was worth every sleepless night and every dollar spent on attorney fees. Gloria Carmichael tried to destroy my life because I didn't fit her vision of what a homeowner in her precious neighborhood should be. Instead, she destroyed her own life and made my neighborhood better in the process. There's a certain poetic justice in that. The propane lock she cut off that stormy night was the beginning of the end for her reign of terror. She thought she was being clever, framing me for the crime she committed. She didn't count on me having receipts, camera footage, and the determination to fight back. That's the thing about bullies, whether they're on a playground or running an HOA. They rely on people being too intimidated or too tired to fight back. When someone finally stands up to them, they often crumble quickly because they're not used to actual resistance. I stood up, fought back, and won. My neighborhood is better for it, and I'm better for it. And somewhere out there, Gloria Carmichael has a felony record that will follow her forever, a constant reminder that actions have consequences. Every time I check my propane gauge and see it full, secured with that heavy-duty lock, I'm reminded of how far I've come. From a divorced guy just trying to start over in a new house, to someone facing false felony charges, to someone who fought back and won, to someone who helped rebuild his community into something good. It's been quite a journey, all because an HOA Karen cut my propane lock off during a storm. She thought she was ruining my life. Instead, she gave me the opportunity to stand up for myself and for everyone else she had bullied over the years. And in the end, justice was served with a felony conviction and jail time. I wouldn't want to go through it again, but I'm grateful for how it turned out. My life now is better than it was before Gloria's scheme, and that's the best revenge of all. Living well, being happy, and being part of a community that works. That's what matters in the end.